I'm good?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry everyone. Hi everyone, I'm Chef Stephanie. If you don't know me, welcome to our last lesson of the semester. Some of you still have another lesson left. My Craig kids have a lesson tomorrow, but for everyone else, welcome to our last Youth Chef Academy lesson of the year. And thank you for joining us. We're going to be making a Moroccan recipe today. It's called Harira, and it's a vegetable soup. So make sure you get your recipes out, all of your equipment and all of your ingredients. On the back of your recipe, you have all of the equipment that you need listed. I'll quickly run through that, but if you miss anything, it's all listed on the back of your recipe, as well as the ingredients we did not provide. So for equipment, you're going to need a liquid measuring cup. That's the kind with the spout. You're going to need a paring knife. This will be good, especially for my 5th graders, because if you're not used to using a real chef's knife yet, then this is a good way at home. Instead of those green knives, it's a good way for you to help cut things. A scissors is also going to be helpful. For all of my older students, my middle schoolers, you're definitely going to want a chef's knife. Of course, adults as well are going to want a chef's knife. You're going to want a peeler, a can opener, a ladle. You don't need this, but it might be helpful. We gave this to you in your last swag bag. It's a microplane. Another thing you don't necessarily need but might be helpful are some prep bowls, measuring spoons, dry measuring cups, something to saute with. So I'm going to use this rubber spatula. You could use a wooden spoon or whatever, anything to kind of stir as we fry some things. And then a cutting board, a pot with a lid, some hot mitts because we're using the stove. And then the last thing that you don't necessarily need but might be helpful is a spoon, like a spoon you would eat with. This is to peel our ginger, and it wasn't listed on the equipment, so I apologize about that. For ingredients, the only things we did not provide are oil. I'm using canola oil. Any kind of vegetable oil will work. If you don't have that, even butter would work, any kind of fat. And then salt and pepper. We provided everything else. Make sure you wash all of your produce. We did not wash this for you. And you're specifically going to want to wash these herbs. So make sure you go wash those, and make sure you wash your hands, as always, before we start to cook. All right, I'm going to set some things aside, and then we'll get started. I want to give a shout out to a couple people. Thank you to the American Cancer Society. They're the reason that we get to do these virtual lessons, so thank you. They have this Kohl's Healthy Eating Active Living grant that was able to support this. So thank you to them. Thank you to Kohl's for providing that funding. And then also thank you to Knorr, one of our long-term sponsors. They're the ones who gave us these little cubes. If you've been in classes with us, you've seen these before. They're called Bouillon Cubes, and that's how we make soup quickly. That's how we make stock really quickly. So thank you for that. All right. So we're going to be starting with some chopping. Let's start with peeling our carrot, and then we're going to chop that up. So you're going to need your vegetable peeler. Make sure that you peel away from yourself so that you don't cut yourself. We're just peeling that outer layer off. So you don't want to peel and peel and peel. You just want that skin. And then for my 5th graders, this is where you might want an adult to help you out, unless the adults in your life let you use a chef's knife. Then maybe not, but this is where usually in the classroom, I would cut this down for you. So now we're going to cut up this carrot on our on our recipe, you'll see that it says that the carrot needs to be finely chopped. If you remember, finely means small. And then I'm gonna just quickly review knife skills, especially for any adults helping their kids out today if you haven't been in the classroom. With a chef's knife, you wanna make sure you use the pinch grip. All my students have learned this, so students, help your parents out if they are helping you in the kitchen. You wanna pinch the blade. You hold the blade itself with your finger, your forefinger and your thumb, and then your other 3 fingers wrap around the handle. Whatever is holding, whatever you're cutting, whatever hand is holding that, does the bear claw. So our fingertips are curled under, that protects our fingertips from being chopped off. And then the motion for a chop, that's the most common way that we cut things, is down and forward, like this. And the part of the knife that does the cutting is the back part. This is the sturdiest part of the knife. It's the strongest part, so it makes it really easy to cut through things versus, the tip, the front part of the knife. So I just cut off the ends of my carrot, and then I always like to cut things down into more manageable sizes to start. So I'm going to start with cutting my carrot in half in one direction, and then I'm going to cut it in half the long way. So with something round, you also always want to create a flat edge for yourself that makes it not roll around on the cutting board and makes it nice and easier to keep cutting it. And then because we want this carrot small, I'm going to cut it further into slices. You'll notice that I'm holding the carrot with a little bridge over my knife like this. That's another good way. If you have something too small to do a bear claw, you can always do a bridge over your knife like that. And then from here, once you've cut it into bits like this size, this is a good time to get our younger students involved. I can find so many tools. Let's see. So from here, it's easier to cut a carrot once it's smaller with a paring knife if you've cut it down a little bit. So from here, they can start cutting it into small bits. And we always use a slice when we use a paring knife. That's one of these small knives. A slice is when you use the tip of the blade to do the cutting. It's this part of the blade, and you push down and pull back towards yourself. You also could use a scissors. It might be a little bit harder to cut through, but if you have even younger kids, also they fly everywhere, but if you have younger kids helping out who can't use a paring knife, that's another good way to get everyone involved in the family. All right, so you're gonna cut this whole carrot up this way. I'm gonna have Chef Leslie come and help me, and she's gonna finish cutting up this carrot for me.
Hey you guys, I saw some of you coming in, and I see that you're wearing your Food Right aprons. You look so good.
Yeah, I'm so excited about that. You're the first U-Chef Academy students to get aprons, so it's very special. You're also the first U-Chef Academy students to get these virtual lessons. All right, so while Chef Leslie continues to cut up that carrot, we're gonna start working on our celery. This also needs to be finely chopped. So we're gonna start with cutting off the ends, any part that's kind of like wilted or brown or doesn't look very good, you can cut those off. And then I always, like I said, cut it into more manageable size pieces. I'm gonna cut it similar to the carrot where I'm gonna do slices first. And from here, once again, you can use the paring knife. This is even easier to cut with a scissors than the carrot is. And you're gonna be cutting them into similar size pieces as the carrot. So I'm gonna give Chef Leslie the rest of that to cut up. And then the next thing we're gonna cut up is the onion. And then I think, yeah, the last thing before we start a little bit of the cooking process is going to be our onion. Now, my middle schoolers have learned how to cut an onion. This is definitely something that you're gonna wanna get an adult to help with if you're not used to using a chef's knife, so specifically my 5th graders. So for the onion, we are going to be dicing this. We're gonna be chopping it, cutting it into like little tiny squares. And the way that you do that is you start with chopping off both ends. You kind of just shave off both ends. We don't want to cut off too much of it. Notice how I did not peel it first. It's easier to peel it once you cut those off. I created a flat edge for myself that I can put flat on the cutting board, and then I'm going to chop it right in half through those flat edges. Once I do that, it's easier to peel. From here, once you cut it in half, the 5th graders can use a paring knife to help cut this next part. Thank you to Brown Street Academy, Craig Montessori School, and Golda Meir School for having us this semester and bringing our programs to your schools. Every year, you've all been so wonderful, such wonderful supporters of Food Right. We've had such a great time cooking with all of you this semester, and special shout out to all of our teachers. We love you guys, and we couldn't do it without you. All right, from here, once you've peeled your onion, we want to do slices through the onion, but we don't want to cut all the way through it. We want to keep them all connected on this end right here. That'll make it easier when we cut it the other direction. I'm going to show you what I mean by that. I'm going to use a paring knife just to show you how a 5th grader could do this if they are using a paring knife to help out. You would do the exact same motion if you are using a chef's knife. So notice how I'm still using my bear claw. You want to keep those fingertips protected. An onion it can be a little more dangerous to cut, so make sure you're curling those fingertips. And you're going to use the tip of your knife, and you're going to do a slice. So you're going to push down and pull back towards yourself, like so. And then you'll notice that I'm not cutting all the way through. It's staying connected. That makes it a lot easier once we start cutting in the next direction. It'll make it easier to cut it when we're doing the next step. And then, as always, like I said, you can use a bridge over your knife as you cut. So once I've cut it all into slices this direction, I'm going to turn it, and I'm going to cut it in slices using my slice in the other direction. So it cuts into these little squares.
We have a question.
Yes.
Can we put the carrot and the celery in prep bowls for now?
Yeah, you can. That's a good question. If you don't have a really big cutting board, you can put them in prep bowls. And yes, you can mix them. The carrot, the celery, and the onion are all going into the pot at the same time. So you can do, if you are using a paring knife, you're going to keep slicing it. If you're using a chef's knife, this is where you'd bring the chop in. Remember, chop is down and forward, and you're using the back of the knife to do the cutting. And then once you get to the end where it's all connected, I just like to do a kind of a rough chop. I'll chop it one direction, so I have these kind of long slices, turn those, and then I'll chop it the other direction, like so. And then I'm gonna have Leslie do the other half of my onion over here. And then yes, you can mix the onion, the celery, and the carrot all together. And then I'm gonna grab my stove because we're about to start cooking these things.
I feel like this is the life-changing onion cutting technique.
Totally, it definitely changed my life. Onions go in everything, unless your family doesn't like onions. They are in so many recipes, and so it's something that we cut up all the time. And if you don't cut it that way, it can be very tedious because you have to kind of stack all of those slices together. All right, thank you. I'm actually gonna have Chef Leslie start the sauteing process. I'm gonna move your cutting board. you. All right. Can we see this on the screen?
Yes.
Cool. So, don't turn that on yet. We're gonna measure some oil. All of our students have learned how to measure. And we need 2 tablespoons of oil. If you don't have measuring spoons, I think we did give you guys some though actually in your first swag bags. If for some reason you don't have any, you can also just use a
I'm gonna hold that. Stephanie.
yes,
Okay.
like a spoon you would eat with, and if you fill this, that's a tablespoon if it's like a big one. So we need 2 tablespoons of that. I'm gonna have Chef Leslie measure that into our pot. And then you're going to be sauteing. Remember, to saute is to stir fry. So you're stirring and frying. And to fry is to cook something in fat. Right now we're using canola oil as our fat. So we're gonna be sauteing this for about 5 minutes. And once again, I'm gonna have Chef Leslie do that while I move on to the next things that we're gonna be cutting up. And you're doing this over medium-high heat. So kind of between medium and high. If you notice it starting to smoke, or if it smells like it's starting to burn, make sure you turn that heat down. So about 5 minutes from here. So the next thing that we're gonna need to add are gonna be our garlic and our ginger. So you should have gotten a chunk of ginger. This one's a little large, so I'm gonna cut it in half. You all should have gotten about the size that you need though. And I know my middle schoolers, my Craig Montessori students have learned how to do this, but we didn't use ginger quite as much in our other classroom. So I'm gonna show you how to peel it. I like to use a spoon to peel ginger. It's a very soft, kind of papery outer layer that we wanna scrape off. I just use the tip of my spoon to scrape that off. It comes right off very easily with the tip of a spoon. I don't like to use a peeler like what we use with the carrot because it's very small and it's sometimes weird shaped. Sometimes it has like little arms coming out of it. And this is very sharp. This is one of the most dangerous tools actually because a lot of people don't realize how sharp it is. And you can accidentally cut yourself. And you don't need something so sharp for ginger. So I just like to use a spoon to scrape that off. You could just chop it off with a knife if you're trying to go really quickly. You definitely do cut into the part that you want on the inside if you do just chop it off though. So it's kind of up to your own personal preference and how much time you have. This is also a great way to get your younger siblings involved. Any age can really do this part.
Smells good.
Yeah, I smell the onion and carrot and celery and the ginger.
Yep.
There's so many aromatics in this. Remember that vocabulary word from class? Meaning smell. We have a lot of aromas. All right, so we have our ginger. And we want this to be minced or grated. If you want, you can use your microplane to grate it. And you're just gonna scrape it along the microplane. Be careful, this is sharp and it can cut you. You're gonna wanna, once you do that, you're gonna wanna collect it from the grater on the other side with either a finger or a spoon. I'm gonna show you how to chop it if you would prefer to do that. You can do this with a chef's knife or a paring knife. I'll show you with a paring knife first. You would do a slice. You're gonna do very thin slices. So you have kind of these like paper thin slices. You can do the same thing with the chef's knife. Down and forward for a chop with the chef's knife. If you're using a paring knife, you always do a slice. How much time has it been? It's been like 3 minutes. Looking good. From here, we have these like thin slices. I'm gonna stack them all. And I'm gonna cut them into strips, into thin strips. And you can do this, like I said, with a paring knife. You can even from here, use the scissors and cut it into thin strips, like so. Or you can use your chef's knife. And you're gonna cut it into these thin strips. And then those thin strips all get stacked together. And then we're gonna cut them into basically little tiny squares. And you can do this with your chef's knife like I'm doing. You can do it with your paring knife into little, like use your slice to cut it into little squares. Or, like I said, get your younger siblings involved using a scissors. This is also a great tool. We use this all the time with our 5th graders. All right. And then from here, you can do your rock chop over it if you want it even smaller. Rock chop is the 3rd way to cut things. It uses the heel of the blade to do the cutting, and you put your hand either on top of the spine or you pinch the spine, and we're going kind of down and forward just like we would do with a regular chop. So we use this when we mince things with a chef's knife. Now, if you notice the veggies that are being sauteed are cooking pretty quickly, we still have to cut our garlic. You can either turn off your stove or turn it down. We don't want to add our ginger yet until we cut up our garlic. So let's go ahead and do our garlic now. For the garlic, you're going to want to peel it. I like to smash it with my chef's knife first. That makes the papery outer layer come right off. And then...
And it's fun.
Yeah, it is fun. And then you can use your microplane again, just like you did with your ginger, if you did use your microplane for your ginger, to scrape it into little bits. Make sure, by the way, you're gonna have to collect it from the underside if you do that. I'm gonna use my knife to cut mine. You wanna make sure you get that kind of dry brown bit off. You can do this with a chef's knife or a paring knife, or one person can cut it down and someone can use the scissors to help out. So we're gonna do the same thing as we always do, cut it into kind of thin strips first, turn those strips, and then cut them into it's like little tiny squares. I just showed you how you can do this with both a chef's knife and a paring knife. So it's kind of like once you've learned how to cut one thing, you can kind of use the same skills to cut everything. They're all just different shapes a little bit. And then I'm gonna use my rock chop again. Once I've cut my garlic up, I'll put it in a pile and do my rock chop over it. And then I like to gather it up. I like to turn it and then do another rock chop over it. It's shaking the whole little island. All right, and then we're gonna add all of our garlic and ginger to our pot. And we're also gonna add all of those spices. So all of the spices you got in little packets, we measured those for you. You can just dump them all right into the pot. And then make sure you keep stirring. Garlic and ginger burn quickly. So don't turn it too high, and make sure you stir it right away. So you should have cinnamon, cumin, cayenne, and turmeric. Moroccan food is known for spices, and all of these spices just add so much flavor to this dish. They really make this dish what it is. All right, I did not have turmeric, so I'm gonna measure that one out. And then you can also measure your salt and pepper and throw those right in there. Need a half a teaspoon of turmeric. Oh, here they are. Grab those.
I love cinnamon in savory dishes.
Yeah, that's something we don't do a lot in the United States, is cinnamon in savory dishes, but it's very common in a lot of other parts of the world. It's so good. So many good smells. Alright, and then our salt and pepper. For salt, you're going to need a half a teaspoon. And then for pepper, you need a fourth of a teaspoon. And if you're used to cooking, especially all the adults, you're totally welcome to estimate. I definitely usually do estimate with salt and pepper because I'm just so used to adding those things to dishes. But it's good practice to know how to measure, and it's a really good way to apply what our students are learning in school. All right, so we just did step number 2. We're gonna add, the last thing we're gonna add is our tomato paste. I'm going to make sure you have your heat kind of low right now so that it doesn't burn. You're gonna wanna open that tomato paste that came in a can. And then I'm going to use my rubber spatula to scrape this out. I'm going to have Leslie do that. I like to use a rubber spatula for tomato paste because otherwise it doesn't all come out. And then we're going to be adding our water very quickly next. So you're going to want to measure out 5 cups of water. We're going to use tap water. Make sure you get cold tap water. My measuring cup, my liquid measuring cup only holds 4 cups. So if yours, just use whatever it can hold to start, and then get up to 5 cups.
That's your job.
Yep, thank you. So we're gonna be adding our stock next. We're on step number 3, and to do our stock, we're mixing those bouillon cubes. Those are the ones wrapped in foil with water. So we're going to add our water. Make sure you have your head back in case it smokes up.
And add it nice and slow.
Mm-hmm.
All right, 1 more cup.
And then you're going to want to make sure you mix this pretty well so that the tomato paste kind of gets mixed in with that water. Don't add your bouillon cubes right away. We want to chop those up because otherwise they don't dissolve completely. Thank you. So we just added 5 cups of water to our dish. And I'm going to turn my heat up to high at this point. We're also going to need to add our lentils. Those are the ones that came in a brown paper bag with an L on it. We measured this for you, so you're just gonna dump that in there. And then next thing we're gonna add is our tomato and our bouillon cubes, but we need to chop these up. So for your tomato, we need to dice this. Remember, dice means to cut it into squares. I'm going to start with cutting out the this little dry part from the stem. I like to just use a paring knife and just use the tip of it to dig right in there and kind of scoop it out. And then I'll show you with a paring knife. You can do the same thing with a chef's knife, but you're just gonna slice it in half the long way, like so. And then I think it says to seed this. Yeah, to seed it, you wanna squeeze out those seeds you're just literally squeezing it. And then this middle part is gonna fall out with all of those seeds. You can use your finger to kind of dig some of that out. And then you're gonna slice this into thin slices going one direction. You can do this with, like I said, a chef's knife or a paring knife. And then you're gonna chop it the other direction. And then those dices can go right into the pot. All right, and then our bouillon cubes, these just need to be kind of crushed up. I like to just use a knife to do this. If you put the whole cube in, some of our 5th graders have learned this, it won't dissolve. It'll stick to the bottom of the pot. So, so you just want to use a knife to kind of cut into it. As long as it's cut a little bit, then it will dissolve. This is what adds that flavor that like a normal stock would have. So remember, stock is a synonym or another word for broth, and broth is like that liquid part of soup. We usually make broth, traditionally it's made by boiling down animal bones, and you boil it for hours and hours and hours, and then you strain out the bones and all of the kind of bits of animal that you don't want to eat, but you would just boil that in water and then strain it out. Then you have this very delicious and nutritious liquid that we use for soups and stews and sauces. We don't all have time for that. So we have this thing called bouillon, or you can find powdered versions, or you can just buy stock in cans or boxes at the store. And luckily, Nor was kind enough to donate these ones for us. All right, so to recap, I'm on step number 3. All of my students have learned how to read recipes for the past 10 weeks, so I know that if you're a little behind, you can follow along on your recipe. I know I'm going a little fast, trying not to take up too much of your night tonight. So we just did step number 3. We added our stock, our red lentils, our diced tomatoes, and then the last thing we need to add is our brown rice. And that came in another brown paper bag with an R on it. So you're just gonna dump that in there. We measured it out for you. And then we want this to come to a boil now. Remember, a boil is when we have big rapid bubbles. So your heat should be on high heat. And I like to just put my lid on top because that contains the heat in the pan and it'll come to a boil quicker. So we're gonna wait for this to come to a boil. Once it comes to a boil, we're gonna start simmering. To simmer, remember, means to cook something on low heat where you have little tiny bubbles. So we're gonna lower, once it comes to a boil, we're gonna lower our heat to low. And I like to leave the lid on top, and then it'll just cook there for like 10 minutes. In the meantime, we're gonna get all of our garnishes ready. The garnish, remember, is the toppings, the things that we put on top to make it look pretty, add a little extra flavor. And then we're also gonna clean up our spaces a little bit. We always clean as we go, as good chefs do. All right, so I'm gonna clean this up and then we'll start preparing our garnishes. You're done with your spatula. I'm gonna hand this to you. Your spoon. You still need your cutting tools. So your knives and your scissors. I think we're done with our, measuring spoons. You can use your little bowls for your garnishes if you want. I don't think we use those. We're done with our peeler. Thank you. So, and then I'm just gonna clean up this cutting board a little bit. It looks like mine is boiling. So I'm gonna lower my heat down to low. Notice how the bubbles are small now. We're gonna set a timer for 10 minutes. All right, and then I'm just gonna clean up my cutting board and we'll start cutting up those garnishes. Thank you to everyone who has joined us tonight and to all of you for such a great semester. I had so much fun being back in the classroom with you all. It's been a weird time in all of our lives with COVID and school being virtual last year, and it was really nice to spend some time with you all in person and eat some good food with you. So thank you. All right. So I think for the lemon, you could, I guess we'll add you could use the lemon as a garnish, but I think we'll do it as, we'll just add it right to the soup. So for the lemon, we're gonna be juicing this. This actually is where you're gonna need some sort of small bowl to juice it in. When you juice a lemon, if you think about this as like planet Earth, where the tips are, these pointy tips are like the North and South Pole. Turned off, sorry. You want to cut it around the equator when you want to juice it. If you wanted to cut it into wedges, you would cut it the opposite way from North Pole to South Pole. So we're going to cut this right in half. So you have two round halves rather than like an oval shape. And then seeds always come out of lemons, so you want to make sure that you juice it into a separate bowl so that you can pick those seeds out. So many good smells in here. I love the smell of lemon. It's so fresh. I think we're only doing half of a lemon.
Yeah.
If you like it lemony, you can add the other half. We gave you a whole one, but I'm just gonna do half of it. And then I'm just gonna use my fingertips to scoop up those seeds.
There's a lot this time.
Yeah. It's a very fertile lemon. Alright. So the next thing we're gonna do is the last thing we're actually gonna do is we're gonna cut up our herbs. So we have both parsley and cilantro today. And these are gonna be a garnish. We want to mince these, I think. Yeah. Remember, mince is to cut into teeny tiny pieces. You can do this a few different ways. With our fifth graders, we always use scissors and we pick off the leaves from the stem and then bunch up the leaves. This is also a good way to get all ages involved. So your littlest kids who can use scissors if you have the whole family helping you today. And then you just bunch them up and cut them into little pieces. If you are using a paring knife, then you can stack a few of these stems together and then cut them kind of where the leaves meet the stem. So I can get rid of these really thick, big stems. Throw those away, and then you can kind of bunch them up and do slices to cut it into little bits. I like to kind of bunch them up again and turn them and do that again. If you are using a chef's knife, then you can do a big stack. And once again, I just cut them where most of the big stems meet the leaves. I'm gonna make sure they're kind of all going in the same direction here. And you'll get some stems in there still, and you'll have some leaves probably mixed in. You can pick those out if you want, mixed in those stems that you're getting rid of. It's easier to cut those big stems really small with a chef's knife than it is with a paring knife or a scissors. So we get rid of the stems really because it's the texture we don't want. The taste, the flavor is there, but the texture is very tough and fibrous. So I just like to get rid of those big stems. But it is, like I said, it's easier to cut up those stems really small with a chef's knife. So it's okay if you have stems, if you are using a chef's knife to cut it up. So I like to kind of bunch it all together again. And I always start with cutting it in half with a chop, and then I stack it. I always try to make things as efficient as possible if I can. And then notice how I'm still using a bear claw. So my fingertips are curled under, even though I'm holding it all together in a bunch. That way they're protected. And I'm gonna do my chop through this, down and forward through the whole pile. I'm moving my fingers back as I go. And then I'm going to pile this all back together, turn my pile, and then I'm gonna do a rock chop. And I'm just gonna keep doing that until I get the size that I want. So I'll gather it back up, turn it, and do another rock chop. So remember, a rock chop is where you put your hand on top of the spine of the blade, or you pinch that spine and you are rocking it back and forth. We're still using the motion of a chop, where we're going down and forward. And I am mixing my cilantro and parsley. If some people in your family don't like cilantro or parsley, cilantro is a common thing that people don't like, then you can pick them apart. It's a little hard to tell them apart, but you can. If you want to know how, you can smell it. Or the cilantro has like smaller divots in it. So I should have shown you this before I started chopping. I apologize. But here's a good cilantro leaf. It's got these like little tiny divots in it that parsley does not have. So this is another cilantro leaf. It's got little tiny parts. And then a parsley leaf, it's like they're a little bit bigger. I really should have just shown you before I chopped it up. I apologize for that. But it is you can tell it apart, but they do look very similar.
Definitely. I sometimes still get confused, and I always,
Yeah.
when that happens, you just gotta do the smell test.
Yeah, and sometimes you have to kind of like rub it to get the smell out, or like break it, and then you can smell it. Sometimes I'll smell it at the grocery store, and I'm like, I can't tell which one this is. Like it doesn't always smell super strong until you start chopping it or rubbing it or whatever. Okay. So this is gonna go on top, and everyone can add this as much as they'd like to their own soup. You also, for a garnish, can add yogurt, either like plain regular yogurt or a Greek yogurt. And especially if you don't like a ton of spice. It's turned off again. That's okay. It'll be fine. My stove, these stoves don't always do the best with really low heat. But yeah, if you try this, if you taste it and it's too spicy for you, add some yogurt. Anything creamy will cut down on spice. And that's very common in like Middle Eastern and African cooking. You'll see yogurt added to like curries and stews as like a garnish, as something that you put on top, and that's like to cut some of that spiciness. Yes.
Gabriella is wondering if we can add sour cream.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and that's a great question. Sour cream is pretty similar to Greek yogurt, and we use it the same way with chili. If you've ever had sour cream on top of chili, it's very similar. All right, so my timer just went off, which means this is done. I hope this wasn't off for too long.
I should have had my eyes on it after it went off the first time. It just turned off.
I should have too. I turned it off this time. So it's been 10 minutes. So if you started simmering yours at the same time as I did, then yours should be done. Ooh, this looks so good. Look at that.
It smells great.
So many good things in here. So many nutrients, so many flavors. All right, so now it's time to serve it up. Oh wait, last step. If you're following along in the recipe, this is step number 4. So we turned off the heat. We add our lemon juice. Give it a nice good stir. And then, if you want, once you taste this, if it's got too much flavor for you, if it's like too salty, because those bouillon cubes can be kind of salty, add some water to it. I would start with 1/2 cup of water. And then you can serve it and top it with your cilantro and parsley. If you have yogurt, you can top it with that or sour cream. Is there a spoon in that rack? Thank you. Let's try it. Look at me ending earlier than I went so overtime last time. I was really trying not to do that. You know how I love to talk, especially my classrooms. All right, let's try it. It's gonna be really hot, so I'm gonna give it a second. Make sure you blow on it.
And say, while we're waiting for it to cool, we can remind them there's a poll.
Oh, there's a poll, everyone. Please take the poll. It's like right in the platform, the video platform we're using. This is still really hot.
Want some yogurt?
That's a good idea. I didn't realize we had any. We're used to like trying to eat soup so quickly in our classes before we have to leave. Thank you. There we go. Look at that. And we've got lentils and rice in here, which makes it a complete meal. We learned about complete proteins in all of our classrooms. And our rice is our grain, our whole grain, and our lentils are our legume. And if you remember from our last lesson, I think our last lesson with all of our classes, or the one before that, we learned about how those two things together make a complete protein, which means you don't need meat if you eat those together. All right, I'm gonna try it. That's tasty. Yum! I hope you all enjoy your delicious meal. Thank you so much for, once again, a wonderful semester. Thanks for joining us tonight. I hope you enjoy your soup. I hope you enjoy your winter break. Have a happy new year. Did I miss anything, y'all?
Nope.
All
Bye,
right.
everyone. We'll
Bye,
miss ya.
everyone. It was yummy. Y'all want some?
Bye guys. Thank you.